Totally okay.
Calling the meeting to order. You're late.
I was in Vegas. I wasn't really checking emails very often. No.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing? So, first up is approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any notes or additions that need to be made? We have a motion to approve the minutes? Second? Second. Further discussion? All those in favor? I think I'll tell you this. Any opposed? You're opposed, Justin? From strong feeling. Any abstain? Anyone abstain? All right. President Shaw,
Thank you, sir. Greetings. So, three things. I'll try to go through them quickly. First of all, the tradition of the State of the University address, we've reserved the date of November 8th, but I've decided to do something different with it this year. Surprise, surprise. And it's going to be more of a summit around enrollment, as we're all concerned about enrollment and institutional sustainability. So there'll actually be two summits. We'll have the one in November, and then I'm planning another one probably in late January or early February. But really would like for you to try to come to November 8th. I'm going to set sort of the national and state context for enrollment, and then our Director of Admissions is going to talk about how she recruits different age populations, and then Director of Marketing is going to talk about where we market and why we do that and how we do that. And then there's going to be time for table discussion, for people to ask more questions, to bring up ideas. The goal is to try to get a baseline of information that we all understand what we're doing, and then we can try to build upon that. So please come. We're probably going to start it like at 3:30 instead of at 4, but we will still have wine when we're done. The important things, okay? Second, I've been thinking about having some more professional learning communities. Those seem to be pretty popular when we did them in preparation for the strategic plan. And I've identified a variety of areas. I'm still fine-tuning those, but there's one whole area that's around curricular reform, and that falls squarely within faculty domain, of course. So I'm just throwing out the topics, and then we'll see where interest is. But there's some places we need to do some research and some thinking, I think, before we really move forward. So one of them is on general education. And I know we've talked a little bit about that in here. So I think having a group to think about what do we want students to know and be able to do as a result of their general education experience. What do employers want? What do the students want? So some work around that. Another one is around this idea of getting our graduates to be demonstrably more creative than graduates of other programs. What does that mean? How would we accomplish that? Another one would be around the part of our vision that says we help students design lives of purpose. What does that mean? And how are we going to do it? How are we going to live up to that part of our vision? So stay tuned. And just, I'm going to sort of throw these out there, but I do understand it's very much faculty activity. There'll probably be some other people on campus that want to weigh in on some of these as well, and rightfully should. But hope you and your colleagues will. Finally, just the board meeting this week, Thursday and Friday. They are doing my annual evaluation and approving my goals for the coming year. I don't anticipate any problems with the evaluation. But if you I think it's actually done in executive session, so you can't actually come and hear, but you can come and hear the goals for the next year if you'd like. But I'll give you a preview so you don't have to. 4 main goals: provide leadership for strategic direction 5, which is that we will maintain financial stability and invest for institutional vitality. So really leading the work around that has got a lot of pieces: enrollment, some of these professional learning communities, fundraising with the VP for development, working with the legislature, all of those kinds of things are part of that goal. The next one is providing institutional leadership for strategic direction 4, which is the one around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that includes hiring the new chief diversity officer, working with the ACE fellow, I think I've mentioned in here before, who's an expert in Native American studies. He'll be here actually tomorrow through Friday, and then he'll be here to stay come January. And then some work with our most economically vulnerable students around this program we're developing called Earn and Learn. So that's the ideas there. And third is strategic direction 7, which is the sort of outward facing one, working with the community. So a lot of work there around this issue of town gown, what it really means, how do we measure it, how do we improve it, and then continuing to work on federal and state policy issues, and working on this idea of a Southern Oregon Educational Collaborative. And then the 4th goal is simply to crack the whip over all my VPs and make sure that they're getting the rest of the strategic plan done, and that we're tracking it, we're assessing it, and we're reporting out to the campus and to the board. So we'll report to the board in January and June, so I would imagine we'll do a report out to campus at the same time. And if there's anything you ever really want me to talk about in this 10 or 15 minutes, please just let me know, and I'll be happy to address a particular topic. Charles?
2 weeks out now from the last time we sat in this room, any new, additional, insightful thinking that's come into play with respect to both our enrollment situation and what's going on around the state? We didn't have a real good sense a couple of
We
weeks
still don't have a good sense of what's going on around the state. Everybody's keeping their cards very close to the vest, which we assume means everybody's probably down. So in a way that's good, misery loves company. But our numbers haven't improved. So we did get the final, HEC has computed our completions, and we did better there. So we're getting like an extra $180,000 from doing better. A couple of schools actually lost money. OIT and University of Oregon lost over $1 million. So I said if we need anybody on our side to help us get them to re-examine the funding model, University of Oregon's a good person. And with this kind of loss, maybe they'll be motivated to help us rethink that funding model. I wish I had better answers, Charles, but I would just be lying if I did. So I try not to do that.
Usually the best policy.
We still have advanced center credit coming in, and
Right.
we also have fourth week numbers at the end of next week, and then we can dig into it. But I agree, there's just not a lot of.
The one bright point are graduate programs. There's increase in most of our graduate programs, and our MBA online, which I know you spent a lot of time thinking about, but that is helping the picture considerably. So
One class has 91 students, the other class has 70-some students. It's huge.
Yeah.
but they have coaches to help with
Of
that.
course.
Yeah. So that is a real bright spot, and you know, it might be a sign of the future. So just thinking about what else we can do that helps us in these changing demographic times.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I will be brief. My first two items are, this is the Provost Mea Culpa report. So I am starting with the news that chair evaluations were not completed. this past year. It was an oversight. There's a workflow issue around all of those evaluations going out. And it is not out of the question that something would get missed on occasion. This is the first time that I know of that any have been missed, at least in the recent past, but the chair evaluations did not go out in a time at all. I did share with advisory council though that in the prior year, last year, there were only 18 departments with any response at all, and of those, 11 had only 1 or 2 responses. So I think that there's a good conversation to be had around evaluations. We're having that kind of writ large. Maybe these campus evaluations are just another example of could they be better, you know, could they be more meaningful, could they be more substantive? Those are just, I'm just throwing those out there.
I would just add that there was also the concern that I've heard that they're not truly anonymous and that there's fear of some kind of retaliation, especially with non-tenured.
Well, I would be open to suggestions about how to message the fact that they are completely anonymous in terms of who sees the responses. There's no way, for example, that I know of that a division director would be able to see where the responses come from, or a chair. So I'm happy to, I mean, if you think that it would be helpful for something to come out of our office or IR, that would be great. I'm all about, you know, squashing rumors when they're out there and squashable.
But I guess I'm a little bit confused. Does that mean that absolutely no one can know where they come from, or can somebody know where they're coming from, but just not the people involved in the evaluation?
You know, I think that I'd have to ask Chris that question because I'm not technically savvy in that way. I just know that the anonymity is a real high priority. So, and I'm happy to ask Chris to come in and talk to Senate. If you want to invite him, I'm sure he'd be happy to just walk through the process and, you know, kind of put people's minds at ease that there is every effort being made to keep those, you know, safe and discreet.
Although there is a concern that if only one faculty member responds, then that might.
Oh, sure,
make it
a
worse.
low N, a small N, you know, could certainly precipitate a little sleuthing. And if a faculty member said something to a chair and then said the exact same thing on the evaluation, there's probably a chance that the dots can be connected. But I mean, we can't,
Right.
you know, I don't think we can control for that, so.
There's also not a very robust response rate to the VP evaluations that are done. They range between 15% and 18% response. So I think it's time to, you know, all that says to me is people aren't really getting what they want out of these, and we need to rethink how we really do some of these.
And partly, again, that same concern, even for VP. Okay.
I don't know how you get around that. I mean, there's a lot of people there. It's harder for it to be revealed in the same way that you were just talking about. So your concern is around things that are being said.
Well, just that if you were to write something that may not be very positive about a chair or a VP, that your name is at some point associated with it by the person receiving the information.
I can
You
tell
don't
you
know.
that when I look at the VP reports, I have no idea where they come from. No idea. I mean, it's just data. It's just written words and numbers. There's nothing else attached to it. And I don't ask. You know, I suppose one could, but then that's a question for Chris. As you
Right,
said.
and I have the same reports for the people who report to me. I don't have any way of knowing who's sending something, you know, who's filling out something for Jody or Karen or.
I mean, it's just a concern I've heard, you know, over the years.
Well, you know, I'm gonna put this back on this group and say the process lives within the bylaws. So if there's a way to make it better or more trusting or trusted, then that would be a good conversation probably for this group to have. But I mean, I think from our viewpoint, given the data, we try to do the best we can with it.
See,
You mentioned the chairs and the VPs, is there a low response rate for division directors too?
Yes, very low.
Right. And in my program, we talked about it, and it wasn't so much that people were afraid of it not being anonymous, it was just that the questions weren't particularly helpful.
And you know, I completely agree with you on that. I think at all levels, people might find that true. So, and again, so that lives here, and that would be a good exercise perhaps to undertake.
Yeah, I also,
I was just gonna add that, in the VP cases, some of us don't work very closely with the
Sure.
VPs, so I don't feel like I can responsibly.
No,
So it may be that it's just kind of, that piece of it's sort of flawed.
So maybe there could be a response, like, I don't have interaction, so that we
No
respond to
basis
it, but
for
no basis.
evaluation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
just gonna add that I spoke with Chris about the division directors as well, and he sent me the numbers by division. The division that had the most participation was 11 responses for division director.
For the whole division.
And the smallest was 3 people.
And those come to me, and again, I don't know who fills those out, or I just get the comments.
How many divisions are there?
7 divisions.
8 counting the
Well,
library.
8 county library, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's one
Well, thank you for that feedback. And then my other mea culpa has to do with faculty contracts. There was an email that went out over I think Friday or over the weekend, from Dominic, and thank you to him for bringing up some of the difficulties that we were having technologically in some ways, and transmitting data. The dollars in the contracts are correct. We've just spent an entire day going through, actually the weekend and today, going through that piece of it. But some of the faculty ranks were not corrected when promotions were given. And so Karen's here to answer more in the weeds kinds of questions, but my big high level sort of response is the money looks fine. The other stuff is where the inaccuracies lie, and we're, just ramped up in terms of fixing those. And I would just ask that you just give us a few days, and maybe Monday then, going back to Dominic's email, ask everyone to check their contracts. So please let your faculty know that it takes a few days to just get the information right, but the salary information should be accurate. At least that's our understanding.
I have it's not directly related, but a little bit. Is there a place where we can find the ranks of all the people, the faculty on campus? Because I'll just give you a little example. We thought that somebody wasn't eligible to be on a committee because it looked like it was an adjunct, and actually that adjunct had been promoted to assistant professor, and we didn't know that.
So I think we give ABSU a list every year of all of the faculty ranks, and
Yeah,
and
Andrew Huggins would be the best,
Yeah.
like Marianne, if
Who's
you,
that?
Andrew Huggins
in
in
our
our
office.
office.
He replaced Mary Ann.
Oh,
So when people are asking for, to fill out committees and things like that, he provides a
Okay.
list.
And if you haven't met Andrew, he replaced Mary Ann, and would be a good person just to say hi to if you're in Churchill. And then my last thing is.
Can I add one thing to that?
Oh,
Sid?
sure, you bet.
And the other thing that came out of, related to the faculty contracts was, the provost office is working with payroll and HR to come up with an information sheet. So several people reached out because they saw that they were either moving on to deferred pay or off of deferred pay, and things are really wonky until your deferred pay is October through the following September. So October 1st is when the switch gets flipped, basically, rather than your expectation that it's September 16th. And because this information is pulling from payroll so that you're paid correctly, it looks a little bit wonky in your contract, and it will change after October 1st. And so we need to just put some information out so that people understand the contract. And I think that will go a long way. This year, thanks to Dominic's email, and I say that in all honesty, people are actually looking at their contracts. This has happened before. The contract has been written this way before, but I don't think people were really paying a lot of attention of jumping in there and looking at their contracts. So we can put a lot better information out there for you so that you understand it better.
Yeah.
All right, that's you.
Okay, that's me. So I have a bit of a list here. First of all, the Senate Constitution Committee is working on language regarding the several bylaws that we discussed last time, 2 weeks ago, on October 1st. At this time, nothing's ready for review, but if senators have specific input they'd like to offer, please send it to Andrew, and he'll collect them and either refer them to the committee or schedule them for a discussion on the agenda. And for your information, the change from graduate studies to graduate council, if it's been keeping you up at night, it was actually voted on already, so we're good. That was in 2016. Some of you might remember that. And also at that point, we voted to have a 7th member on it, so that also explains the change that might have been disturbing to some. The advisory council has asked Sue to prepare an enrollment report on recent new programs, including healthcare administration, online MBA and OAL masters, and wine business certificate, and so she should be providing that information to us shortly. There have been some questions about revisions to program expectations for tenure and promotion that several programs submitted some time ago, and Jody reports that those are now being reviewed by the Faculty Personnel Committee and will come to Senate for approval next. And not quite lastly, but almost, Deborah Rosenberg will return to Advisory Council as immediate past chair. As you might remember, there could have been a conflict with her being on the board, but it was decided otherwise. Division directors will be invited to Senate in the near future to discuss data regarding post-tenure review, which is something we discussed last year.
Actually, I have a slight update to that. If you all recall, the advisory council last year told us that they would be sharing some questions with the division directors. And there was some confusion as to whether or not those questions went out, and we discovered that actually they were almost done being written, but didn't get sent out. So they were sent out this week to the division directors. Originally the intention had been to give them this summer to collect data. So I don't know how quickly they'll get back to us, but as soon as they get back to me with some data as to how many issues they've encountered with post-tenure review, I'll invite them to come in and talk to us about that. So we'll see how.
And then one last, was there a question?
Just a clarification about that. We were working on the questions when Sue, and we tried to include Sue in on that for her best judgment. And then she basically communicated to us that she would pose the questions in her way to the directors in the spring. So I don't know whether that happened or not, but that was like what we had agreed on in the spring. So it's good that you've got some out.
Yeah, I spoke to the directors, a few of them, not all of them, at Directors Council as they were leaving. I talked to 3 of them. I think Sue's recollection had been that she had done that as well, but the directors thought they were waiting for hard questions, specific questions. So I think it just got a little miscommunicated somewhere in there. But we've got it covered now.
Good.
And then I think you've been asked before, we'll ask you one last time. Does anyone want to join Advisory Council for the term, or should we just wait for Mark Kovac to return in the winter and not replace him? So I guess the first part of the question is anybody dying to get onto the committee? We'd love to have you, but are you okay with our not having that extra person and waiting till next year?
There were 3 more meetings before.
Any opinion?
But there's no cookies.
There are no.
Yeah, that's really good. Any comments, concerns? Volunteers?
Ryan had a question earlier, did you get an answer?
No, but I'll wait till Marion's done.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I'm done as far as this.
Okay.
And then I'm just gonna move on to one other little thing that's not connected, so this would be a good.
Oh, I can sit and wait in uncomfortable silence until somebody volunteers for AC too.
Or we could just volunteer you.
No. I've been voluntold to do enough of it. The question I had, was there any explanation given for why the revisions to expectations for P&T are taking this long?
There has not been as of yet. Sue said that she will look into that, but I have not been given an actual explanation for.
Thank you.
Would you like us to ask that question?
I just didn't know if there was one given. I guess if they're going to review it for faculty personnel committee in the near future, that will hasten the process.
So I know my report for committees isn't
Okay, that's fine.
but it's just one little thing. Most committees, as you know from 2 weeks ago, have been filled, but there are a couple where representation is really important, and we can't just put 2 people from one division. We have to have someone from every division. And the bad child of the group here is DHL. We need 2 of them. It's for the guilt factor. One is for academic assessment, Chad, and the other one is for university studies. And they're really important committees, and until they're filled, they can't really do their job. So if you could go twist a few arms.
There's no way I can do anything else.
You said assessment?
I said academic assessment and
University studies.
University studies.
What's DHL?
It's
Education, health, and.
That's our decision.
the people down there.
General studies?
So, and I don't know, I mean, judging by the bylaws, it doesn't even sound like we could just get somebody from another division to fill in.
Well, that's an interesting question that we haven't discussed yet, but we discovered that there are a few committees that have, the bylaws require every division to be represented, in which that wasn't happening, in which there were some cases where like one division would have 3 people on and several other divisions weren't represented at all, and so I told them to knock that off. But you know, now we're having trouble getting the people who are supposed to be represented to actually come forward. So you know, if this continues to be a problem, we might have to consider changing those bylaws so that just anyone can serve. But
Or
I think,
a minimum of so
Right.
many divisions.
but I think, especially with university studies, that you know, there's always tends to be it tends to be a contentious area where people, you know, from particular divisions might get upset because something's not approved, but they don't have anyone. If they don't have anyone representing that division on the committee, then you know, they don't necessarily have someone to talk to about that.
So is this at a program level or division level?
Division.
Division.
Because
Supposed
the
to have one
division
for
all of
everything.
education too,
Right,
right? So
right.
That's not
Actually,
just,
Dennis, yes.
it's not just the like 5 of us over there.
Yeah,
It's all of education, right?
yeah, but they said to ask you. So.
Okay. I think I'm a lot of ass lately. My wife's like, you say one more thing? Yes, one more thing. I'm like, all right.
That's it.
All right. Any other questions for Mary Ann? So next we have Lori is going to just touch on the one set of bylaws updates we do have for you.
Right, so this regard is in reference to bylaws section 5.340. And this is something we voted on 2 years ago, in April 18th, 2016. And we voted to just clean up the bylaws to reflect the fact that we no longer do a plan and then a report. We now do it all once in June, or it's due in June, in Activity Insight. So that's what this is all about. And I submitted 2 documents. One is a proposal page, essentially saying just that. And then the other is the red line markup version 2. And it has the strikeouts, and then I added clarifying language to sort of bridge the gap so the sentences wouldn't be so clunky. I've asked you to look at those, please, and make any suggestions regarding, clarity. I'd love to have that input.
And then you also put in the 1.311B.
Right,
the
and
vice
then
chairs.
this is also what we discussed or 2 weeks ago rather, to clean up just the language, it's just an oversight. Shall the bylaws be amended to state chair-elect instead of vice chair, because we no longer have vice chairs, what we talked about. So these will, let's see, feedback and then voting.
Yeah, so, if there's no issues, my hope is that we can approve these in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So my department, my division, had a comment on this, and I'm not sure exactly how it fits in, but I'm gonna bring it up. So they wanted to know about the FPAR and it being due in the fall versus the spring, because apparently there's some wording, and some of us aren't done teaching our classes in the spring when it's due. Like I teach my main class in the spring, and so I'm like a year off. And so they were wondering if it's gonna stay in the spring, or if it's actually gonna be due over the summer, or at the end of the summer, or if it's gonna stay how it is. That was what I heard from my area.
Well, it's the spring, right?
Right.
That's what the
Okay,
changes
so
you
he sent me a,
Timeline comes from the provost. I
okay,
don't believe it's outlined in the bylaws. So that's a separate, separate from this.
Yeah, well, the only place that's in here is on 5.343. The change reflected is the faculty professional activity report, FPAR, should be prepared at the
Right.
close of the academic year and will be due in June.
oh,
See
okay,
announcement from the provost office for specific deadlines, so.
okay, because it says fall in the email, that exact sentence, the email he sent me, yes.
Yeah, that's the
They
old
said-
version.
Right,
So
so,
that, in the red line version, that's stricken out.
okay, so it's changing to be in the spring, and we all like that. Because
I agree with you.
it really is bad for me to have it do it,
fall.
yeah.
So
Or
you want
the
it in the fall? is what you're saying?
August, or, well, I teach my class, and so I don't have my assessment done to see how well I did compared to last year, that like 2 weeks before school's done, because I haven't even given my final. And I teach Gen Chem, and then my high level class is just in the spring. And so for me, having that assessment due in the middle of the one thing I'm doing doesn't really help me improve for the next year. It makes me do it real fast in the middle of what I'm trying to finish, and then, but like if it was, I could end, take a breather, and then write my, about, that's just what I have heard from people in my division, is that spring deadline is strange to them. And fall used to be in there, and then it moved to spring, and they just were wondering.
Does anyone know why it was suggested to move to spring?
I think because the report and the plan became one thing, and the idea is, from what I understand it, the fall retreat for the chairs to discuss the plans with the faculty, and it actually goes through a process. Now, it used to all be just, regular just emails and documents, but now it's all online, and then it goes to the chair, and it goes to the division director, and they send back comments, and I guess all these steps have to be completed by the time of the retreat, but there's really nothing to say that it has to be at the retreat and not.
Because we don't do that at our retreat, I know that.
I think I think you're supposed to, but I could be wrong.
I don't
Yeah.
think spring is magic.
I don't think it is, it just feels rushed to me, and that I don't get to do a really good job because I'm in week 8 or 7 or whatever of my most important class.
This did come up in a slightly different way at advisory council, because someone did email me about it, and they weren't asking for fall, but they were just saying that they wanted to at least come after teaching ended in spring. And I asked Sue about that, and she said that there's probably wiggle room on that, because the reason they have had it in the past where it is their thought was that then chairs and division directors would get it done before the end of the term, but I don't think that's actually necessarily happening. But the other thing I think she did say about the reason it shifted was that for other faculty, this is according to Sue, fall, doing it in fall, it was hard to remember what you did in the last year, and if you're doing a plan, well, now
Right.
you're in the middle of fall, and you're already doing that plan, so it made
Well,
more
but-
sense to do it at the end of one
Yeah.
academic year, but.
I think it makes sense. I just personally would like it due end of June, like after I am done teaching, not like currently, this is my 3rd year, so I've done this for the last 2 years. I do not know how long you have been doing FPARs or FPAPs. So I came in, FPAP was already gone, and I just had to do the FPAR. And it really felt to me like reflection and then a plan for the next year, and it's very hard to reflect when it's not over and make a plan for the next year when I haven't completed what I'm doing yet. That's pretty much how I felt. So that's just my perspective coming in as a new person, and I like reflecting and planning, but I like to do it when I'm done so I can see the whole picture and not like partway through. And then I always end up going in and fixing the FPAR, but they've already got my version, and so they don't actually see the updated, I finished the year, here's the real, so that's where I see this strangeness that my area brought up.
So I would say that at least some people in my division don't want to work past June 15th, because that's when the contract is over, and so asking us to extend it 2 weeks, in my opinion, would be way easier, but there's some stubborn people.
But they could do it early.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, it's due, it doesn't
I
have
know.
Open from June 1st to September
or even July
20-something,
15th.
whatever the day is, and then people could do what they want.
I mean,
Or divisions could at least do what they want. I completely agree. I felt my previous university, everything was due first week of September for the previous year. It gave you a chance to reflect and actually assess where you were. This year, I couldn't believe that I was supposed to reflect on my experience in the middle of it. It was really awkward.
Well, what I would recommend then is that you all go back to your faculty and discuss this further and sort of get a feel for where people most want to see this. I will bring it up with Sue again at the next advisory council about, how much flexibility on the administrative side is there for when these happen.
We just got an
Much
email.
easier for the administrators, because they can spread them out instead of trying to do them all on the same day.
So that the chairs are no longer on contract,
That's where the hiccup is.
yeah.
The division director's on contract on the chairs.
Shares done all of it.
The way I looked at it, you could do your evaluation anytime during the year, and you just look back from the last year. You're not done with that quarter. Same thing with fall, right? You're not done with fall. So you just can't reflect on that, but you can reflect all the way back.
It's easy when you've been here for 15 years, but when it's your first year, that was the awkward
Well,
part, right? But now I can kind of get into that flow.
and that would be the case as well when I first got here, and I had to do FPAR in fall.
Right, okay.
I've been here 3 weeks. So.
Seeing that also seeing,
Yeah, so there's going to be, I don't really think it's a good time. You just, at that point, you reflect on the whole last year. Next year, you reflect on the whole last year. You can anticipate a few things. But I guess I had a lot more to reflect upon when I could think about things more recently, from fall, winter, and spring, and what I was actually doing that spring. And then you could start to put goals for the next spring. But you couldn't, give results, but you could talk about them the next year.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would still do it the end of June. I just appreciate the concern that we can't give people a few days when they're off contract.
Yeah.
That's the other reason I would suggest a later date.
And this has been an optimization problem for decades. It really has. It's been a problem in optimization for some time. Fall, everything's starting up, you got a bazillion meetings to go to, you got your classes to prepare for. That hasn't worked so well. Spring hasn't necessarily worked so well for the reasons yet. Summer doesn't work so well because people are going off contract, okay? I don't know if this is helpful at all, but the provost office is looking at some metrics here too, and I don't know what the timeline is now. I've been out of that loop for so long, I have no idea. But they've got some metrics that they're trying to respond to around this, among other things, with respect to probably both the HEC and the Northwest Commission. And I don't know what their timelines are, but maybe there's a conversation to be had through the provost's office in terms of what metrics are kind of pushing their buttons as well. See if there's any clarity at least to be gained by this. But in terms of people have struggled with this as an optimization.
And I realize it's off topic from the actual, but since my people had brought it up, I wanted to say it.
Talk to your folks when we visit, because I don't think Alexis Phillips is here. All right, so move on to our guest, Kristen Gass.
All right, how are you guys doing? For those of you that, yeah, it's a little warm. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Kristen Gass. I'm the Director of Financial Aid here at SOU. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the collaboration between Enrollment Services and Financial Aid and faculty, and the importance of the LDA, the last date of attendance, reporting that's going to be required this upcoming, well, now. And so I really wanted to stress the fact that while we're a non-attendance taking institution, the Department of Ed requires that we do know who sits in our class, who shows up, and then when they don't stop or they don't come, when their last day of attendance is. And it's important for us for audit findings and to stay in compliance that we record this. So, you know, some of you may know that when you assign an F or an NC now, you have to provide a last date of attendance. And so everybody's pretty much comfortable with that. We haven't had too much feedback at this point, or negative feedback. But what's coming up ahead is the no-show reporting for those that do not come to class at all but are on your census rosters. And so we're asking at some point during the term that you look at the census report, and by the end of week 3, you identify who is not on that census roster and send them to the registrar's office via the Google form that Dr. Stillman sent. What that does is that alerts us that that student should not get paid for that class, and that can affect their financial aid, okay? So real simple, the form is 2 questions long. It asks you to list the class you're in, and it asks who the name of the student is, and then we'll take it from there. The 2 big differences that I want to talk about really quick is that if you're an online only class, they have to do something to be part of that class. They can't just log in, okay? And so that's a really big misconception that if a student just logs into an online class, that shows that they're there. They have to participate in an academically related thing. So they have to do a discussion board. They have to submit something, okay? Otherwise, it's not enough and they'll be deemed a no-show. If you teach an in-person class, them just showing up is enough, because the Department of Ed looks at that and says that they're given the opportunity to learn. Whether they take anything away from it or not, they're still there and they're open to learning, okay? So you have till the end of week 3.
That's debatable.
That is debatable. The feds are, you know, feds are. We really appreciate this. This is a huge compliance issue. We know that it's a change in policy. We're not trying to infringe on your faculty rights on how you take attendance, or if you do, you just have to somehow alert us to the date and then if they're in class. Yes?
Where is the no-show form?
I can resend it out. I know that Jody included it on the email that she sent out, I think, last week, but I'll resend it out to her and she can distribute it. I'm not sure where it's housed, to be honest. I think that's more in Matt's area, but I'll give it to you. I will. Yeah.
Did you say Matt sent out a census, attendance thing?
You mean the rosters?
Yeah.
He's going to.
Oh.
He's going to start doing that, and I think you're going to be able to access them a different couple ways, whether it's via Moodle or I don't know how else he would, but he's going to give that to you, and we just ask that you check it, see who hasn't shown up or participated, and then let us know.
So we should see something in our emails about this this afternoon?
Yes, yes.
So this is what you've already sent out though. So if we already filled that form out, that's all.
Right.
Right. And so will there ever be feedback to the professor about that student that hasn't been shown up? Or should we just be like, okay, we filled out that form, we're done?
I don't think there will be feedback at that point, because it really falls into the hand of us adjusting their aid or reaching out to the student, unless you want. There will be rare cases where the student says, once their aid is adjusted, they'll be like, but I went. And then we may reach out and say, okay, can you verify they did something? That would be the only case at that point. Anything else?
My question? Really? Stillman sends us an email every term that says, if a student doesn't show up, don't administratively drop them.
Right.
I think that's dishonest, because we're now obligating students to pay for something they never got. Is that policy all around financial aid? So what about a student who is not on financial aid? Can we drop them?
No, that is a policy that we're reworking, because we're not an institution that does drop. And that's something that he doesn't disagree with, but I think it needs to be reworked. At this point, he does not administratively drop, and we're working to try to start a process with that, because financial aid does not care if you drop them or not. Financial aid cares to know whether we paid them for sitting in the class.
So this policy is all about students on financial aid, so that 40% of the students who are not, they're being wrapped up in this.
Well, it's not gonna, if they're a no-show and they're paying on their own, it's not gonna affect them financially.
Well, I want to drop them before week 4 so they don't have to pay for it.
Right, no, I agree with that, but that's more of a records and registration policy. But when Matt gets back tomorrow, I'll definitely touch base with him on that, because I understand that, I do. Anything else?
Any other questions?
All right.
Just to clarify, so we have students, they're in our class, and they decide not to come to class anymore.
Okay.
Do they usually go unregister, and then I get that little email saying, hey, this student is not in your class anymore, and then that's taken care of, right? Then we're supposed to keep track of the possibility that people dropped out of the class but did not go and do that second part and unregister themselves, and we're supposed to keep track of them, and then inform you.
No, I think you're just supposed to keep track of when the last day they showed up at,
Okay.
and then whether or not they showed up in the beginning.
Because I was taking roll a day, and this person hasn't shown up in the last 5 classes, I'm just deleting that person
Right.
from my registers. But I didn't get anything saying they had dropped my class.
Right.
But at this point, I mean, they haven't shown up and they're not participating, and
Right.
I'm done. So that person, I'm supposed to fill out a form and send it to you.
Now, the form is really null and void after
Okay.
the 3rd week.
Okay.
So if after that they haven't come,
Yeah.
then what's gonna happen is when you assign them a grade, so I'm assuming you give them an NC at that point, right? You'll just assign the last date that you saw them, and I'll take it from there. You don't have to do an extra step and alert me at that point, because at that point, they're already so far into the term
Yeah.
that it doesn't matter.
Okay, so this is about the first 3 weeks.
This is about that first 3 weeks, which is crucial for census reporting for us. Yeah. So we are here to help. You can email me with any questions. If you forget to do the form and just send the name to me, that's fine too. We'll help you do that. We know it's a new process, but it's really important for us to stay in compliance. Thank you for letting me come and talk.
This is the end of week 3, right? This is the beginning of week 4.
Right.
So this doesn't even apply now.
No, it's not for fall term.
Oh, okay.
Right. I'm just giving you a heads up going into winter and spring that it's coming. All right. Thank you.
All right, next up, we had a conversation last week about the student evaluation task force idea, and we drafted a charge for a potential task force, and wanted your feedback on that discussion or questions or any thoughts about that, with the hope that if people are in general agreement, that maybe we could vote on this in 2 weeks to actually form the task force and get started working. Any thoughts?
It's still a good idea.
My division is in favor of the task force.
Why it's Senate
Well, I was just gonna, maybe this is too detailed, but one of the things it says is research, probe, and best practices. And I just, maybe we don't know at this point, but is there a simple way of doing that?
of researching them?
Yeah, I mean, of finding out who does what and what is considered the best
My
practice in this
idea
area.
was to make a librarian the chair of the committee. So I was talking to Melissa over here. Do you have any response to that question of?
Well, I'm wondering if there is some kind of repository of this kind of information somewhere.
Well, there's a
or-
lot of published articles about it. I mean, we'd have to start looking through, different databases and.
Yeah, there's plenty of articles published on, I just went and I checked last meeting, women on average on a 5-point scale are about a half a point lower, just for being a woman. And then no matter what question you ask, that's true, right? And so there's a lot of research on how we should be using these evaluations. I mean, in a statistical study, if you have outliers, you drop outliers from the data, right? At least if they're significant, or you take an approach that considers bias. So there is a lot of research on what types of evaluations are least biased. There is less research on what we do to address the bias and how they're used. So there's a lot of data out there, but I agree, a librarian or somebody that is really good at looking through research articles and, you know, checking sources and then doing a real comparison of, is that data set similar to the data and population we have here? So there's plenty of stuff there, but an easy way to find what's best, I don't think exists. I think there's no silver bullet.
Right, and from what I've understood from our discussion so far is it's not eliminating bias or reducing bias is certainly important, but it's also about getting more useful information from the evaluations, right? So it's not just making them more fair, which is very important, but it's also, is this going to be information that will help us improve teaching and, you know, those kinds of things. So it's the qualitative stuff too, not just, you know, comparing data sets and things like that.
When was this last done?
Over 10 years ago, or about 10 years ago?
I
That's
think
when
they,
we went online, but did we change the questions when we went online? I think it's the same questions, we're just doing it online now.
Karen, did you know?
I think they got modified when we went online, but not number one. That probably has been since the university was created,
But so there haven't really been looked at significantly. Okay, someone that I spoke to, it's like, they just did that. I was like, really? It didn't sound like that. So it sounds like that was incorrect information.
Switching gears a little, as I was reading this, and the first sentence, create a diverse, equitable, inclusive community where learners flourish. This is nothing more than a question. Is there any wisdom at all to having one of our staff from disability services?
Actually, as soon as I sent out the information about this, Sean Foster reached out to me and said, I would love to be a part of this conversation and make sure that that there's a disability perspective on this. So absolutely, I think it's important.
So that might be changed.
Everyone's in favor of the task force.
So the question that I would have with this process, would you like in 2 weeks for us to talk to our constituents, see if there's any volunteers, and then nominate them here in 2 weeks to start this task force?
I mean, that'd be great. I would like, my understanding is though, the Senate approves the creation of a task force, so we would need a vote to create the task force. So if anyone wants to come back and amend the charge in any substantive way, let's do that. And then we'd love to see a vote of to create the task force, and then certainly if you have anyone who strongly wants to participate, I would love to hear those names as well. Great. Sound good?
And then we would have to vote on those names?
I don't think we have to vote on the names any more than we have to vote on names that go on the normal committees. I think my understanding is sort of how the Senate appoints people is through the normal process. So I think that's okay. Unless anyone has some strong other feelings about that. But.
So we're going to vote on this in 2 weeks?
I'd like to, and, I think unless someone comes up with a dramatically different charge or something that needs to go back out to faculty, I think if we can come to agreement 2 weeks, that'd be great. Or we're just charging right along and get out a little early. I think any announcements or new business.
Did you find any volunteers for Jason Katz Policy Council, or I think that's
No,
on
that was the one I went to. Before the meeting, I was like, there's something else I was supposed to tell. No, as far as I know, unless someone has reached out to him directly, I have not received an update that that's been filled. So if anyone is still interested.
Well, in my division, Matt Moriali was interested. He's a lawyer and
Okay.
was going to reach out to Jason, I think, but
All
he
right.
might connect them.
Yeah, I'll reach out to Jason to see if.
If we still need someone, yeah, that would be great.
Any other announcements from you guys? So one thing I wanted to mention, because we talked a lot about gen ed last time. In advisory council, we discussed this some more, and as Linda talked about, the professional learning communities. One of the things we realized is that the last time we did gen ed here, it was about a 3-year process. And we all agree that there is gonna have to be a lot of research first. And so one of the things we thought is that perhaps this professional learning community is a good way to start that. So Linda can sort of begin that process, and once they've collected quite a bit of information, we could form a task force at that time to sort of act upon that information as faculty actually building a curriculum proposal. So if you have any thoughts about that, feel free to let me know. And then wanted to remind you all that I have put on the agenda in 2 weeks for a program that I am proposing as part of the communication department. We are proposing a digital cinema major. There are a number of documents already in the drive. It is a lot of material. I did want to say that from a perspective of understanding what you need to understand to make a vote or ask questions, it's really the SOU proposal and the course proposals that you should look at. There's a 49-page HEC proposal that you're welcome to read through, but it's much more of a outward-facing document for the HEC and Provost Council. So if you haven't read the entire HEC proposal, don't feel like you're missing any of the curricular information. The curricular information is in the SOU program proposal, which is much shorter, and all the course proposals. And feel free to reach out to me directly if you have other questions, like larger questions ahead of the meeting or anything like that. For the approval process, we've been urged to get out of Senate by the end of this term. But as chair, obviously, I don't want to be seen as pushing my own program through. So we do have 3 weeks, or three sessions. So I'm not going to be trying to rush this, but I do hope that people do come to the next meeting having looked at the materials with questions. I'd hate to get in a situation where we come together to talk about this and I've scheduled a lot of time and people don't have questions they haven't read yet. So
Wouldn't this normally come to us from the curriculum committee?
it did.
Oh, it did.
Yeah, curriculum committee approved it already. So, yeah.
Can I ask you a question about it, since we have a moment? I was trying to discriminate between maybe the 3 majors, well, the proposed major, and then COM major and MDA major. And I guess that would be my main kind of question: how do those all work together or separately? Because the contents, from the uninformed person might look similar. The media and the digital this and digital that. And
Right. So
I'm fairly, adept at it, but maybe not as much as
sure
I should be.
Well, I mean that's one of the reasons why we'd like a major is because I think there's confusion among students as well. And in the document is a letter. The entire MDiv faculty reviewed the proposal and support it. They would like to see a digital cinema major created. The way I tend to communicate this difference is that EMDA is a program about computer-based creativity. And that includes everything from animation to graphic design to game design, experimental computer artists, like kind of it's a eclectic major. Digital cinema is about storytelling, camera-based storytelling. So it is about making film and video type stories, including documentary, including web series, including conventional film, including some VR stories, but all camera-based.
I see. That makes sense.
Yeah, and communication currently has the 3 concentrations, one of which is digital cinema. So that's the other thing, is that this program looks like a pretty large new program, but that's a lot of it's because some new courses are replacing existing courses. It's all built around the current concentration. clarification.
Yeah, and it seemed like in the comm major, I'm not that familiar with the comm major, but it seemed that the comm major had a lot of those titles that were very relative to, you know, the broad spectrum of media.
Yeah, for communication studies, being kind of, I teach kind of across the 3 concentrations. We also encourage our communication studies students to also take some of the digital cinema classes because they have to be literate in that type of technology in that area, but not necessarily still as filmmakers, but we still feel that the comm students, they should know how to do some video editing and camera work because that will just be part of maybe their jobs. So I think
Right.
that's still our connection.
That may be an exposure, but not an in-depth or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Any other new business
Well,
or
there
announcements?
was- it's not real business, but it did come to our attention, our brains, minds, hearts, that some of the new people, and maybe some of the old people, don't know what all the acronyms are, or they might not know, like Dennis asked about, everybody else knew the difference between the 3 majors, but Dennis did, and so we want to encourage this kind, I'm joking. No.
I really want.
We just want to encourage, especially the new senators, to feel free to ask questions and not feel lost. I mean, we remember what it was like at the very beginning, and everybody seemed to know what was going on except for us. And so please do raise your hand and ask a question if you feel that there's a little something preventing you from understanding the whole discussion.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. I remember Deborah always had the rule that you had to define your acronyms. I forgot about that. So I'll try to define them as well. Any other new business or announcements? I tried to pack the schedule, but y'all, we're done.
Yeah.